Every problem the Vikings had all season long all came home to roost at once.
Mike McCarthy is out as the Dallas Cowboys head coach.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes.
The Houston Rockets rally from down 13 in the fourth quarter to beat the Memphis Grizzlies.
How does adding Carson Beck change the Miami Hurricanes' expectation for 2025?
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Rams absolutely boat raced the Vikings.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast.
What a dominant performance it was by your Los Angeles Rams. They absolutely dominate the Vikings. They took it to them in the first quarter, and that really is my first big takeaway, is this Rams team absolutely flipped the script on their first quarter woes right away. You come out of the gates, and you drive the ball down the field. You took it 70 yards on 7 plays. You scored an opening drive touchdown on a pass, Matthew Stafford to Kyren Williams. And just like that, you're up. And one play that will probably be forgotten was the hard count on 4th down earlier in the drive to get the Vikings to jump. Very next play, Kyren Williams, he gets the touchdown catch. The Rams up 7-0 early. Then you get a defense that just completely was dominant. On the Vikings' first drive, Byron Young, he gets the TFL on the first play, a sack on the second play. It's 3rd and 21, just like that. They end up forcing a punt. Just a great defensive series right out of the gates. This Rams defense was hungry. They're all over the place. You had pressure from your front four. And then on the very next drive, the Rams, they get the ball and they're moving it. They're moving the ball down the field. And unfortunately, Bo Limmer, he gets caught for a unnecessary roughness penalty after a 9-yard gain. That cost the Rams 15 yards. That made it 2nd and 16. Should have been 2nd and 1. And then, unfortunately, the Rams had to settle for a 34-yard field goal in this one. And you end up going 10-0. And that's another big takeaway is the Rams won all phases of this game. All 3 phases of this game were won by the Rams. The offense scoring 27 points. The defense holding this Vikings offense to just 9 points to 269 total yards. You absolutely dominate them in the first half. You take a 24-3 lead into halftime. That was the largest halftime lead in a playoff game ever in Los Angeles Rams franchise history. And the defense, they continued to show that you're getting better, that you're improving, and that you're really peaking at the right time, because the Vikings get the ball back after the field goal, and you're getting takeaways. Kobe Durant, he intercepts Sam Darnold on the Vikings' 3rd drive. The Rams did not capitalize. They weren't able to score points from it. But on the Vikings' 4th drive, they end up making a big mistake. You have a Jared Verse scoop and score 57 yards for a touchdown. He's doing flips into the end zone. I'm sitting there yelling, hey, please, Jared Verse, don't hurt yourself, my man. But Ahkello Witherspoon, he did a great job foisting that fumble. Jared Verse shows that instinct to pick it up, make something good happen with it, and he gets in the end zone. And just like that, you blink, and the Rams are up 17-3. I'll say it again. This is a Rams team that was 31st in the National Football League this season in first quarter scoring, averaging 1.8 points per first quarter for the season. The Vikings, on the other hand, they were 2nd in the NFL in first quarter scoring. The Rams not only shut them out, they held them to 2 first downs. That's how dominant this defense was. And the Vikings on their 5th drive, they turned it over again after Kobe Turner sacked Sam Darnold on 4th down. You had the conductor conducting, and that gave the ball back to the Rams. A great field possession. They're on the 39-yard line. And with 1:27 left in the first half, you get a touchdown from Davis Allen. Matthew Stafford, he finds Davis Allen for a touchdown. And just like that, the Rams up 24-3 before the half. And that was it. That was the game. Who's going to call Dan Campbell? Who's going to call Dan Campbell and tell him that you're not going to be playing the Vikings in 2 weeks? In fact, if the Rams play like this against an Eagles team that, yeah, they present some problems, they didn't look great, you could be looking at the Rams in 2 weeks, not the Minnesota Vikings, with the performance that they put up. And you could look at some of the causes for concern, that being the lack of spreading the ball around to guys like Cooper Kupp. But still, Cooper Kupp didn't have a catch in the first half. They didn't really go to him offensively. There was that shot of Matthew Stafford talking to Cooper Kupp. And, of course, they're boys, right? They're going to find a way to make some plays together at some point. And then in the second half, in the third quarter, you had a really nice catch, really nice grab, good separation. He had a 29-yard catch, Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp on 3rd and 9. That put the Rams on the Vikings 24-yard line, and then they get another field goal thanks to Joshua Carty. So another big kick. He's made 15 straight kicks, so he's really gotten the groove of things after we were talking about maybe the Rams still having some kicker problems. And the Vikings, we're going to score some points. Of course, the Rams defense, they were just trying to make things difficult. If you're going to score, we're going to make you use some clock up. And the Vikings, they didn't score their first touchdown of the game until the 5:05 mark in the third quarter. It was a 26-yard catch by TJ Hawkinson. You had Christian Roseboom defending him. And look, TJ Hawkins is a great player. At that point, you just know that they're going to have some type of production offensively. You have to assume so. The Rams at that point, they're up 27-9. You're still feeling good about that. It's the National Football League. You just have to not turn the ball over, not do anything that is going to hurt yourself, and there's a good chance that you're going to walk away with the victory. And the truth is, they didn't do much in the second half, but you didn't need to because you're up 24-3. They scored just 3 points in the third and fourth quarters combined. But the good thing for the Rams, they didn't need to because the defense played so well. It had 9 sacks. 9 sacks for this Rams team. 9 sacks. 6 sacks in the first half. That was the most ever by a team in a playoff game in 25 years. Aaron Donald was in the building. I'm not so sure that number 99 wasn't playing in this one because of how dominant they looked. Because Sam Darnold, I think he was seeing ghosts pretty quickly. The ghost of Aaron Donald, the ghost of Deacon Jones, the ghost of great Rams in the past, because clearly they had him uncomfortable. He was holding on the ball a little too long, and the Rams just weren't getting the job done. 8 of their 9 sacks came with 4-man fronts. So you're getting pressure from your front four. You can keep guys in coverage and guard the weapons they have with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. And you got to give this Rams team all the credit in the world, considering the week that they had, considering that you always know what happened. And thoughts and prayers to everyone in Southern California that's been impacted by the wildfires. I live in Hollywood. I evacuated. I have friends and family that have lost their houses, everything they've ever had. It's a very sad time, for being completely honest, here in Southern California. But I think this Rams team kind of felt that, and they rallied behind that. They didn't complain. The Vikings were complaining. We don't, before, of course, everything happened, the Vikings there, how does a 14-win team not have a home playoff game and this and that? Vikings, they had a lot of fans there. It felt like a college bowl game in a sense, because there was a good amount of Vikings fans. I mean, the Rams showed up, they showed out, they're making noise all night long, but there was a larger volume of Vikings fans that were there that would have been in SoFi because of relocating. But the Rams, they didn't complain. They went out there and they didn't make excuses. They just took care of business and they got the job done. And it really, really is a testament to the culture of this Rams organization with Sean McVay and everything that they have built as a team and as a group. So it doesn't surprise me at all whatsoever. They were able to go and win this game. It was a terrific game plan by Chris Shula, well executed. Matthew Stafford was sharp once again. My prediction for this game was I had the Rams 27, the Vikings 23. I was right on the Rams scoring 27 points, but the shocker is that you held this Vikings team with all the explosive weapons to single digits. 269 total yards, 163 passing yards, 106 rushing yards, 3.8 yards per play, 6 for 17 on third downs, 1 for 4 on fourth downs, 9 sacks. You forced 3 punts. The Rams had 10 penalties, too, for 95 yards. That definitely something you want to clean up. But you caused a fumble, you had an interception, and you didn't get beat bad by Justin Jefferson. You held Justin Jefferson to 5 catches for 58 yards. He didn't get in the end zone. Their leading receiver was their tight end. If I had told you that before the game, you'd have felt pretty good about the Rams' chances of winning. Jordan Addison, 3 catches for 29 yards. Jalen Naylor, 3 catches for 33 yards. So it was just a fantastic win for the Los Angeles Rams. I hate to say this about an NFL playoff game, but it felt easy. They were cruising. It felt easy. This is as comfortable of a playoff game win that I've experienced. And that's because of how dominant that first half was. So, yeah, what a win for the Los Angeles Rams. You felt the energy in that building. You saw the team wearing LAFD gear, hats, and shirts. And it was just an incredible performance by the defense. All phases of the game, we needed a Matthew Stafford that was going to be sharp, a Matthew Stafford that looked locked in. And he was 19 for 27, 2 touchdowns. He handled the blitz well. Kyren Williams, 16 carries for 76 yards. On the receiving end, Tyler Higbee actually was the Rams' leading receiver tonight. 5 catches for 58 yards. Behind him was Puka, 5 catches for 44 yards. So that's another takeaway. We'll talk about that tomorrow is you have Higbee as an additional weapon. He was breaking tackles. He was making plays. Puka Nacua got banged up a couple times there, but he's going to be fine. And you spread the ball around. I mean, Demarcus Robinson hadn't had a catch in a while. He gets a catch for 23 yards. Kyren Williams, 3 catches for 16 yards, had the touchdown. Colby Parkinson, 2 catches. Hunter Long, a catch. And Davis Allen had a 13-yard touchdown catch. So you look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Rams caught passes from Matthew Stafford tonight. He spread the ball around. Kyren Williams run the football. Matthew Stafford being efficient, but really major kudos to that defense. I said it before, I'll say it again. Just an absolute ferocious, dominant performance by a hungry defense. Just absolute beasting by those guys on the front. I mean, just give them all the credit in the world. But yeah, we're going to break this one down more in depth tomorrow. Just want to give a quick, rapid reaction. And let me know down below in the comments section, I mean, what is your reaction to this big Rams win? And are they done? I don't think so. You're going to hear everyone pick the Eagles. You're going to hear everyone say how the Eagles this, the Eagles that. And yes, the Eagles, they present some problems. We're going to have an entire week to break it down. But this is a Rams team that is comfortable being uncomfortable. They're comfortable when their backs are against the wall and people are doubting them. They embrace, they lean into what Dan Campbell said. Has anyone texted Dan Campbell yet? Has anyone contacted Dan Campbell? They have the Lombardi trophy from Super Bowl 56. It's in the middle of the Rams locker room right now. And underneath it, it says football heaven. Okay. They're going to embrace this. They don't feel like they're done. When you have a quarterback like Matthew Stafford that looks locked in, Sean McVay, this group playing for this city, everything the city has been through in the last week, it was a beautiful thing tonight. And hey, whose house? It was temporary Rams house tonight in Arizona, but just an incredible victory for the Rams.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED ON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Every problem the Vikings had all season long all came home to roost at once.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast.
Today, it's a funeral. It's a eulogy. The Vikings season ends with quite a whimper after 14 bangs. Just two absolute disasters. And that's how quickly it can end. I want to approach this show a little bit differently than I would usually do like a game recap, because I'm going to be honest, I don't really think you guys want to hear about like Jared Verse beat Cam Robinson and blah, blah, blah. It's all a moot point with a lot of players that aren't going to be on the team next year. So instead, I would like to look at this a little bit more broadly and how what happened to the Vikings in this game was a microcosm of everything that has happened to them all year long. The Rams outplayed the heck out of the Vikings, and the Lions outplayed the heck out of the Vikings last week. There was a point made on the broadcast that Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were kind of saying, well, they won 14 games, but look how little that matters, right? Like that doesn't do anything. You got to win in the playoffs, right? Which is true. But I think if that were the case, then don't watch the regular season. But we do. We show up every week and we watch the regular season. I'm getting DMs from people saying, I'm done for somebody said, I've been a Vikings fan for 40 years, but I think I'm done after this year. No, you aren't. I'll see you Sunday. I'll see you for free agency day for sure. By the time it's March, you've had two months of distance, you'll be back. Some of you are going to be back already. By the way, if you were curious, if you're new to Locked On Vikings goes on throughout the entire offseason, as does the Minnesota Football Party. Basically, everything I do will go on throughout the entire offseason. This is a year-round operation here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So I hope that you will come chill out. But the point I guess I'm making is the regular season is still, at the very least, an instructive thing that tells us stuff about the team and helps the team make decisions about what to move forward with. But I also just want to push back on the idea that anyone wasted their time this year. This year ruled. It was a lot of fun. And ultimately, that is the point of sports. You do not get into Vikings fandom because you're sitting there making a big bet that they're going to win you Super Bowls. You didn't make that decision. You didn't sit down and go, which team's going to win me a lot of Super Bowls? I'll be a Vikings fan. That didn't happen. It's not what anybody does. You fell in love. Whether you grew up falling in love or you got into football right around the time that Brett Favre and the Vikings were doing their 2009 thing, you fell in love then, or maybe earlier, or maybe, just a couple years ago. You fell in love. It was not a rational thing. And when the Vikings lose in the playoffs and their season ends and your gut gets punched, doesn't mean you were an idiot for getting into it. I really want to push back on that. Your instinct might be, well, gosh, next time I won't get my hopes up, then I won't feel as bad. And I got two things for you. One, yes, you will. Okay, I've tried it. We've all tried it. Doesn't work. Doesn't help. Two, then I think you're taking the point out of it. You know what I mean? The point of all of this is to get your hopes up and to have fun. I spent a month idly daydreaming about what if Sam Darnold won the Vikings a Super Bowl. Wouldn't it kind of feel right? That it was going to be like a journeyman that like wasn't supposed to be good, and he would be the guy. Like comparing to all of Vikings history, like it had to be that. It would be so perfect. And I got to daydream about that for a month. And you know what? That was awesome. I'm glad I did it. And the sting of it falling away is going to fade. But it was worth it. That's just where I'm at. Maybe you're more jaded than me and you don't enjoy football anymore, in which case maybe it's time for a new hobby. I think you should look in the mirror and really ask yourself that. But all that is to say, that was the first thing I wanted to start with. The regular season, it doesn't get you anywhere to win 14 games if you still got to go on the road and play on Wild Card Weekend. And the Vikings had very much a direct chance to not do that, and they blew it. And then they very much had a direct chance to get into the divisional, go play in Philly. They did not do it. Team failed. They didn't fail quite as spectacularly as they did last year, but they also don't have the same excuses as they did last year. And now, 3 years into the Kevin O'Connell tenure, he is garnering a reputation as a regular season maven that can't win in the playoffs. There's only one way to fix that, and he'll have to wait till next year to get another chance to. But when I say all the things came home to roost, How often this whole year have I sat here in front of this mic, in front of this little webcam, and said, boy, everything the Vikings do takes too long. Their passing plays take too long. Sam Darnold holds the ball too long. Their blitzes take too long. Their stunts take too long. Their coverages take too long to set up. Everything is too slow. And the Rams do everything fast. That, when we did the crossover with Doug McCain earlier last week, we kind of started talking about this in a different context of like conservative versus aggressive and how it's like these two kind of opposites meeting. And I think it turned into, by the Rams' design, and the Vikings were helpless to stop it, it turned into slow versus fast. Tortoise versus the hare. And the hare won. Stafford got the ball out in 2.5 seconds every time. And if your pass rush takes more than 2.5 seconds to even engage with the blocker, let alone beat the blocker, but just to get to him, you're not going to get there. And it's not like the Rams were throwing short passes all day long. They were throwing 25-yard passes right at the top of their drop. That is NFL level Sunday execution. The Vikings offense took 4 to 5 seconds. You had former quarterbacks logging onto Twitter and saying, you have 2.5 seconds. It was Tommy Kramer tweeted that during the game. You have 2.5 seconds. And that is the rule of thumb. It's been the rule of thumb for decades. It's the rule of thumb when you talk about like analytics. It's the rule of thumb for how next-gen stats decides whether or not to log a pressure on the offensive lineman or on the quarterback has 2.5 seconds elapsed. That's the rule of thumb. So when 2 of the 9 sacks, that Sam Darnold took happened after 2.5 seconds, that's a structural issue. That's either your quarterback just is holding the ball too long and has to stop doing that. And the fact that you were incapable of getting him away from that is a coaching failure, not to undo the quarterbacking failure that it is, but at a certain point, coach, you got to fix it. It's either that, or he has to hold the ball too long because your scheme takes too long. Time has to be the focus of the offseason. Time. And guess what? Drawing it up shorter, going to different pages of your playbook is free. In any McVay Shanahan style playbook, it is divided typically. It's divided by like day of install, but within that day of install, it will be the passing plays will be categorized by drop depth. Your 3-step drops, your 3 steps with a hitch, your 5-step drop, your 5 steps with a hitch, your 7 steps. 5 different categories. And all of those different plays have different timings that are meant to align with the length of that drop back. So if O'Connell wanted to call more stuff quicker all year long, he had it. It's in there. But what I think happened is mistakes made in August, or I'll say decisions made in August, proved costly in January. Those decisions are, we're going to spend more of our training camp time on the longer developing plays because we want a high average depth of target. We want to push the ball deep. We want to take big shots, and we want to get chunks and explosives. And I bet there's an analytics backbone to that really proves, the deeper passes do better. That's a pretty well-known statistical thing, right? You want to be aggressive. You want to go down, push the ball down the field, of course. And I think they spent so much time on that all year long that their 3-step playbook was too thin and they didn't have stuff that they liked from there. Or maybe it's just that Sam Darnold can't do that. He can't just get the ball out quick with regularity. He'll hold it too long. He'll turn down easy reads. He can't make those fast timing reads. And if that's the case, then so long and thanks for all the fish. There it is. That might be where we're at with Darnold, who had a terrible game. I wanted to start with the play calling thing. And I think the same idea made its ugly face known on the defensive side with Flores and the blitzes. And I'm starting to grow issues with the Flores defense it was a very good defense all year long. Statistically, it was one of the best defenses in the league. It didn't feel like it because it kind of does give up explosives, but then get major plays in the end. But then if you have a game where you don't get a big turnover, where you don't get the big sack, the Vikings go without a takeaway for the first time all year, then, it doesn't look that good. And yeah, they kind of, they gave up most of their scoring, or they gave up 24 in the first half and then only 3 in the second half. But the game was over. So the Rams cut the engines and called very conservative plays. And of course, they didn't score. Too little, too late, you know?
Mike McCarthy is out as the Dallas Cowboys head coach.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
Landon, we got some Cowboys news. They are moving on from Mike McCarthy as the head coach. Your thoughts?
So many thoughts, I guess the first thing we should start with is kind of my initial thoughts, which was surprise. I think we had
shocked.
just to get to just an hour before previously, we had gotten some news that the Cowboys had kind of not started negotiating yet, which still kind of was phrasing it as though this was to come, that negotiation was to come, and that this whole situation was still ahead of itself. And before we knew it, suddenly it's over. The negotiation is done, and that there is no more negotiation that's going to happen, and that Mike McCarthy is not going to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys in 2025. So I think I'm still kind of dealing with the speed in which it went from, man, they haven't even started, to negotiating, to, oh, it's over. I think that's the initial thing that, that's part of just living on social media. And then I have to say, look, maybe it's the optimist in me, but I have to say that I feel like I felt the first bit of positive feeling I felt about this front office in a little while, because they were willing to put their foot down about this situation. I think, a lot of people we can sit here and debate whether or not Mike McCarthy should have come back and the merits of that, and whether he should have gotten a 5-year deal or a 3-year deal, which, I'm sure those are all parts of why the deal didn't, go through, and what McCarthy wanted versus what the front office wanted. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that is most heartening to me about this situation is that the front office looked at the situation, was not willing to give Mike McCarthy carte blanche after what, they had experienced, had a specific number or a specific scenario in mind for which they wanted Mike McCarthy to return. And when those parameters weren't met, and it didn't look like that specific scenario was going to be played out, they weren't going to cave on the situation. They were willing to put their foot down and move on. And I'll even go so far as I wouldn't be surprised if they had made this decision a while ago and were kind of just doing a lot of this maybe for show, for the locker room, for the fans. But I just think the fact that they were willing to move on from Mike McCarthy, I think that's a positive, that they're willing to do something to make changes that they need.
I've had mixed feelings this whole time about what the Cowboys should do with Mike McCarthy, because I do think he's a good coach. And I've been saying this since they hired him. I think he's always been a little bit of an underrated head coach. I thought he did a pretty good job with the Cowboys over the last 5 years. But I will also acknowledge it does feel like he's not the coach to get them to the next level, right? So that should make it an easy decision to move on. I'm also a little afraid that they just don't know necessarily how to hire coaches, and that you might get a coach that's worse. But I think the unknown of, hey, you might get somebody that's actually better, you might stumble into the right coach, was at least appealing enough for me to move on. Now, here's the thing that I think is really interesting, Landon, is we're saying that the Cowboys moved on. I'm not so sure it was the Cowboys that moved on. I was listening to a report from Jane Slater today, and she said that McCarthy just got kind of tired of the contract negotiations and not really knowing where the Cowboys stood. So he just told them, I'm gone. Right. And he went to his assistants and the other coaches on the staff and said, hey, I'm not coming back. You're free to go look for other jobs. And I think there was, with all these teams hiring their coaches, all the assistants were also in limbo. I wonder how much of it, if it's McCarthy kind of putting his foot down and saying, hey, I'm just done with this. I want to move on as well. Let's get this over with.
And look, there's no reason this couldn't be a mutual parting of ways, right? Like, I think, we've had this idea that both sides have wanted this to continue, but I think that the reality of it is that both sides probably wanted it to continue under their own terms, right? With Mike McCarthy, having an upgraded salary with maybe a lengthier contract. And then maybe the Cowboys viewed a shorter term situation where they actually were giving play calling duties to somebody else, or
But my question is, though, Landon, if you've even come to the conclusion that you want McCarthy back, let's say on a 2-year deal, let's just say like a small term deal, how could you not figure out a way to get that done? Like, if you've come to the decision that you want McCarthy back in some form or fashion, how do you not get it done?
Because I think that ultimately at the end of the day, I think one thing that we can maybe agree on, and maybe not, but I don't know that the Cowboys were all that convicted in re-signing Mike McCarthy. If they were convicted in re-signing Mike McCarthy probably would have been re-signed. If you wanted Mike McCarthy back, you don't have a problem signing him to a 5-year deal. I think that they wanted Mike McCarthy back under a very specific set of terms, and when that didn't play out, I think they were willing at that point to go, okay, no, you know what? Now it's time to just move on. I think from their point of view, it's like, hey, Mike, we're willing to give you another shot at this. And from Mike's point of view, it's, hey, I should be rewarded for this great job I've done. I should get a pay raise and all that. Those are two very different stances on contract negotiations. I can understand how they weren't able to bridge that gap. And certainly it's not, I think when they go into these situations, they don't always have just one scenario in mind. I think that they'd have to have a contingency. Maybe they looked more and more, they were eyeballing that contingency plan more and more as the negotiations were going on and going, you know what, like, why are we banging our head on this wall that we feel like we haven't been able to break through anyways? Maybe it's time to start fresh.
My other question is, why now then? If you decided that you wanted to start fresh, which again, I'm totally in favor of, why not do it as soon as the season is over so that you can get a start on the coaching search? And again, I'm not saying that the Cowboys missed out on Mike Vrabel, because I didn't really want Vrabel to be the coach anyways, but you missed out on the opportunity to interview him. You missed out on the opportunity to interview Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, because now you can't interview those guys until, I believe, after the conference championship games, assuming they make it to the Super Bowl. Why wait?
I don't have a good answer for that, honestly. I mean, and certainly not going to defend every aspect of what the Joneses are doing, that's for sure. But I will say that they haven't really missed anything, like you said. Like, I understand the why wait at like questioning, but at the same time, like, the opportunity to interview Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, like, unless those two get hired, and let's be clear, Ben Johnson's not really an option for this team unless the Cowboys are really changing their stance. And frankly, unless Ben Johnson is really changing his stance on the kind of team he wants to go to.
But shouldn't that be telling if you can't even get an interview with Ben Johnson?
No, because I don't listen. I love the idea of Ben Johnson, the play caller, but the idea of giving Ben Johnson the kind of control that he wants over an organization when he's never done anything remotely close to this before, like, be reasonable. Like, that's scary. Like, I understand that. I understand.
I'm okay though with scary though at this point, right? Like,
that's fine. That's okay. But I think it's also reasonable to understand, like, to be wary about giving any one of these kind of hot at the moment play callers full control of your franchise when, I mean, let's be honest, the vast majority of those situations fail. I'm not suggesting Ben Johnson's going to be like that, but like, I guess my point is that there's this idea out there that like Ben Johnson can't fail, and Ben Johnson is asking for a lot for a first-time head coach. So I can understand why some organizations are not just willing to, especially organizations that haven't done that since Bill Parcells, who had, let's face it, a much better track record than Ben Johnson did when they did it. I don't think that the Cowboys are just willing to just hand that over again. And whether that's good or not, I think that is debatable. I think that that's just something that they're not willing to do. So, yes, they may have cut themselves off for maybe one or two of these candidates, but honestly, I don't know that they have, because if there is a coach that was, I mean, again, for better or for worse, if there's a coach out there who wants to be the head coach of the Cowboys, I have a feeling that they'll wait to get the interview when it's time for the Cowboys, when they come calling for it.
For big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better on FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Jaden Daniels may have led the Commanders to their first playoff win in a long time, but now they face the number one seed Lions. FanDuel, has the biggest point spread of the divisional round with the Lions giving 8.5. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes.
There was a report confirmed by the Las Vegas Review-Journal that Deion Sanders' people reached out to the Raiders and said, hey, I'm interested, which came a few days after he went on Good Morning America and said, hey, I would coach in the NFL if I could coach my sons Shiloh and Shador. And so it was kind of like is Deion Sanders looking for a way out? Are the Las Vegas Raiders a likely landing spot for him? Well, we got an answer about that from two reporters from The Athletic who are covering the situation very closely, and this is what they had to say. There's been some buzz about the University of Colorado head coach Deion Sanders, but the Raiders have, quote, zero interest in hiring him, according to a leaked source. Agents using the stubbornly quiet Raiders for leverage goes back as far as the franchise is losing. So what does this mean? Well, as I talked about over the weekend, actually, it was over the weekend, I had an episode where I talked about all the madness happening. Coach Prime is currently not one of the highest paid coaches in college football, despite all of the value that he brings to Colorado, right? They have a tough decision to make. They have to figure out a way to pay him enough for him to feel like he's being owed the proper money. But you also want to pay him like based on what he's done, and what he's done on the field is a 9-4 record and then last year was 4-8. So he's 13-12 overall. And so you want to pay him appropriately for what he's done. You want to pay him appropriately for what he does to the program. Obviously brings in a ton of popularity. I think if Coach Prime were to leave Colorado, all of the top talent that he brought in would leave with him or would just leave the program in general. So you have to figure out a middle ground, because I don't know if Colorado is going to pay him the most in the country. When I did this episode over the weekend, a lot of people were saying he needs to be paid 10 plus, 13 plus. This is just a rundown of the top 5 highest paid coaches in college football. Kirby Smart currently and Dabo Swinney are 1 and 2. They're the only coaches in college football who have won a title as a head coach right now. Kirby Smart's paid $13.2 million. Dabo Swinney's $11.1 million. Texas coach Steve Sarkisian is 3rd at $10.6. Then you have Lincoln Riley at 4, USC head coach at 10. Ryan Day is also at $10 million. And then Mike Norvell's at 10 flat. Then you have Kalen DeBoer at 10 flat. Brian Kelly at 9.9. Mark Stoops at 9, Lane Kiffin at 9. So I feel like he could probably be a top 15 paid coach because realistically, you have to do what you have to do to keep him happy, right? If Deion Sanders is the best way for you to get top talent, be one of the most popular brands in college football, and generate tons of buzz and boost the local economy, you got to figure out a way to keep that. You can't lose that. So the Raiders not being interested, I think Deion Sanders coming out, or at least not coming out, but Deion Sanders reaching out to the Raiders. I think that was a little bit of a contract push, right? We know that Joel Klatt reported that Deion Sanders has a contract offer on the table from Colorado. He has yet to sign it, but he has not signed it yet. So clearly there's something that he wants different on that contract, whether it's more money, whether it's a contract like stipulation where it's like, hey, I want this on Tuesdays, or I want my sons to have an office here, whatever it is, right? We don't know what it is. That's just me making up hypotheticals. But we know that he probably wants another contract offer. He wants him to sweeten the pot. So what other NFL job just opened up that is interesting that I think people are going to try to latch Deion Sanders onto is the Dallas Cowboys job. The Dallas Cowboys job, obviously Coach Prime played for the Dallas Cowboys. He had a ton of success with them. He is probably one of the biggest stars in Dallas Cowboys franchise history. And he obviously didn't play his entire career there, but still, I think a lot of people sort of see the draw there. Deion Sanders, this is sort of the case. He understands that Dallas gets attention. He turned Jackson State into an FCS power, has turned Colorado around. The thing that the Dallas Cowboys, and this is sort of where it comes into play, the Dallas Cowboys kind of messed up by not interviewing other coaches or not sort of making their decision on Mike McCarthy sooner, because Mike McCarthy, they just let him walk today. But now they sort of have to wait for these teams to finish their playoff runs, right? You can't be interviewing Ben Johnson mid playoff run. You're right. You can't be interviewing Aaron Glenn mid playoff run, and jobs are going to close. And so you sort of have to hope that if you're the Dallas Cowboys, that is, that you can lure a candidate over to Dallas with the star, with the brand, with the notoriety. Is that candidate going to be Deion Sanders? We don't know, because Deion Sanders has said up until this past week he's had no interest in coaching the NFL. Again, and I say this because I think a lot of people are trying to twist the words. Deion Sanders saying he would coach in the NFL to coach his sons is him saying he'd coach in the NFL. It's a possibility, right? Doesn't matter if it's now or in the future. It is a possibility now. He said it, he put that out there. If he doesn't want people running with that, then obviously he could come out and say, hey, I don't want to coach in the NFL. Like, I was just using that as leverage. Obviously, he's not going to say that. So Coach Prime is willing to work in the NFL. The one thing that I've always said that I see as a challenge for him in the NFL is, one, he wants to coach his kids, which could get a bit complicated because I don't think we see nepotism in the NFL. Obviously, Shador and Shiloh are both really good players, so it wouldn't be nepotism. But like, this isn't a Bronny James. I think realistically, Shador Sanders will be a franchise quarterback, and I think Shiloh Sanders could be a special teams guy, right? Who could probably work his way into the rotation at some point in his career. So there's a path for both of them to obviously be on an NFL roster. That being said, what happens if he's the head coach and Shador Sanders is struggling and the fan base is wanting to go away from Shador and to draft another quarterback? What happens if the owner wants you to bring in a veteran quarterback and that veteran quarterback beats out Shador in training camp? This is just hypotheticals. Or what happens if Shiloh, for instance, isn't holding his own, right? What if Shiloh's struggling on defense and special teams wise, they have other guys who are just better suited to play special teams, and Coach Prime gets a little frustrated that people are like, okay, it's time for him to go, right? The general manager decides it's time for him to go. Is he going to want to coach there? Is he going to hold the team hostage, or is he going to be like, yeah, it's a business, son. You can't, we're cutting you. Like, I feel like that's a weird situation to be in. Another thing, Deion Sanders has full power, full control over everything in Colorado. And I don't know if he'd have that in Dallas, of all places, right? Which I think the one thing that people complain about Dallas is it's kind of like a zoo. It's like a spectacle. I think it was Dalton Schultz that said that there was tours through the training room while they're working out, and like they could, like, feels like they're zoo animals because people are like looking through glass, tapping on the glass and stuff. And then also, this is another thing. Deion Sanders won't be the biggest star in Dallas, obviously. I think that's Jerry Jones's world, right? You're not going to outshine Jerry. Like, that's just not how it goes. And so is he okay with being sort of the second fiddle to Jerry Jones? I don't know. And is he going to love how involved Jerry Jones is, right? I think that's kind of been a lot of the criticism about Jerry, is like, he not only like runs the show, will go on a radio show and talk about you, but he also decides a lot of things, him and his son, Stephen Jones. So I don't think Deion Sanders to the NFL is happening. I think more so this whole contract negotiation thing was just him figuring out a way to position himself to maybe get more money, to maybe get better incentives, whatever it is, to maybe get a bigger coaches pool, like whatever it is. I don't think Coach Prime is going to the NFL. I also don't think this will be the last time we hear his name linked to the NFL, because obviously he's one of the biggest names in football right now. So we sort of have to deal with that. Otherwise, I mean, it's just life, right? You have to deal with the fact that, hey, Coach Prime is a hot commodity. People want to link him to their team. People want to write about it being linked to their team because it gets some views. People want to talk about it on their YouTube shows because it will get them views. That's just how the Deion Sanders experience works. But I don't think he's going to go to the NFL.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Houston Rockets rally from down 13 in the fourth quarter to beat the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, look, this was a game that it looked like it looked and it felt like the Grizzlies were just firmly in control for a majority of this game. Felt like every time the Rockets were able to make a push or go on a little run, the Grizzlies had an answer. And a big part of that was turnovers. The Rockets were not doing themselves any favors. One of their win conditions, one of the things that they do better than most teams in the NBA is take care of the basketball. In this game, the Rockets had 23 turnovers to the tune of 31 points for the Grizzlies. Meanwhile, they did still force 18 turnovers and scored 27 points off of those 18 turnovers by Memphis. But normally the discrepancy there is much more in favor of the Rockets. They usually take really good care of the basketball. They didn't do that in this game. And in various stretches, when the Grizzlies did start to pull away or when the Rockets started to get back into things, it was when they were taking care of the basketball. And then they were able to execute offensively, and then they would get back into it. And then they would go back to not taking care of the basketball, and the Grizzlies would jump back out in front due to some, combination of their high-octane offense and their insane shot making. And actually, talk about insane shot making. The Grizzlies hit so many different Hail Mary shots in this game, late in the shot clock, 2 seconds left, 3 seconds left, whatever, sending up prayers at the rim. John Morant hit a almost half-court bomb after a jump ball to put the Grizzlies back up 12. In the fourth quarter. And that was one of those where you're just kind of man, it's just one of those nights. Everything is going the Grizzlies' way. But the Rockets didn't quit. And that's one of the best things. That's one of the coolest things about this team is they have so much fight, so much resiliency. Young teams are often really susceptible to getting punched in the mouth and then folding, right? This Rockets team never folds. They never give up. They find a way to fight and claw and scrap and get themselves back in these games. And that's exactly what happened here. The Rockets were still down. They were, you look at the third quarter and it kind of looked like it was about to be game over in the third quarter. Desmond Bane, after his little technical interaction with Dillon Brooks, he reeled off a quick 15 points and the Rockets were down double digits again. And then they found a way to put together a 9-1 run to close out that third quarter, put themselves in a good position to start the fourth, only down 5. And then in the fourth quarter, they found themselves down 13 again because the first handful of possessions in the fourth quarter, they kept turning the ball over. First, it was an Amin Thompson turnover. Then it was an Aaron Holiday turnover. Then Fred VanVleet checked back into the game because Ime was like, I've had enough of these turnovers. And then Fred turned the ball over. It was just brutal. And then from that point, after going down 13, and after being held scoreless for the first almost 2.5 minutes of the fourth quarter, Rockets went on a 33-18 run to close out the game and come out on top and get the win. And they executed. They finally started taking, they still had a few turnovers down the stretch, but they were executing at such a high level to close out this game. Over that stretch where it was 33-18, the final 9.5 minutes of this game, that stretch did include that Hail Mary half-court heave from John Morant that he wound up hitting. But even including that shot, the Grizzlies were limited to just 7 of 17 shooting from the floor, 41.2%, and they had 4 turnovers. Meanwhile, on the other end, Rockets shot 11 of 14 from the floor, 2 of 2 from downtown, and they were 9 of 12 at the free throw line. The Rockets were attacking constantly and getting to the charity stripe, a place where they really struggled last game against the Grizzlies to convert on all the attempts that they were generating at the free throw line. They did a great job in this one, and they had so many big plays down the stretch. They had the one where Jalen Green had to kick it to Fred with no time remaining on the clock, and Fred just shot a moon ball to go up, hit the 3 to go up 107-105. And that was I guess the basketball gods finally looked at the Rockets and said, all right, fine, you can have one too. We gave the Grizzlies 4 or 5 of these this game already. You guys can have one too. And, to swing back out in front with all that momentum. Rockets had a play where they had all this beautiful ball movement that started with Jalen Green driving, getting, attracting the attention from the Grizzlies defense, then passing it to Steven Adams, and then Steven Adams, taking a quick dribble towards the rim to draw the defender, and then bounce passing it to Amin Thompson for an easy dunk at the rim. And keep in mind, Amin Thompson, he was sensational during this Rockets comeback. He had 12 of his 19 points during this stretch in the fourth quarter as the Rockets were able to rally and get back into this game, including multiple pivotal plays on the defensive side of the ball. He had 5 blocked shots in this game, 2 steals, 7 stocks total. He had the one where he blocked the shot and then got out in transition and kicked the pass ahead to Jalen Green, who was able to step back into a 3-pointer and knock that shot down, which was a huge 3 for Jalen in this one. And then he had arguably, I think maybe the most important defensive play of the game. First, Jalen Green with the biggest bucket of the night, driving and making the go-ahead layup with a little more than 30 seconds left in the game. Drove, elevated, finished through contact against Brandon Clark. Probably should have been an and one to put the Rockets up for good, 116-115. And then on the very next possession, Ja Morant, not wasting any time, trying to get a 2-for-1 opportunity, drives the length of the court, gets into the teeth of the defense, and Amin Thompson guarding him beautifully, forces the ball off of him, ball knocks off of Ja's waist, chest, whatever, goes out of bounds, turnover on Ja Morant, his second turnover of the quarter, and then comes down on the other end and knocks down a pair of insanely clutch free throws to put the Rockets up 3. Just big play after just executing. And there were still some hiccups. There were still some moments, some, spots where the Rockets could have done a little better. There was a trap on Jalen that resulted in a turnover. There was a Şengün turnover that happened where he got poke checked, and it didn't matter. The Rockets still managed to find a way to win. And this was easily one of the best wins of the season for the Rockets. And now they hold the tiebreaker against the Memphis Grizzlies. They've won 3 of the 4 meetings against the Grizzlies. They hold the head-to-head tiebreaker. Doesn't matter what happens in the next meeting that they have later this month against Memphis in Memphis. And that's going to be really important as far as the standings are concerned, considering that the Rockets and Grizzlies have basically been right there like neck and neck at the top of the Western Conference for most of this season. That tiebreaker, I feel like, is going to be really, really important down the line for this team as we look at playoff seeding a little bit later on as the season kind of starts winding down and we start taking a look ahead at the playoffs and where this Rockets team is ultimately going to shake out.
For big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better on FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Jaden Daniels may have led the Commanders to their first playoff win in a long time, but now they face the number 1 seed Lions. FanDuel has the biggest point spread of the divisional round with the Lions giving 8.5. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
How does adding Carson Beck change the Miami Hurricanes' expectation for 2025?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Miami Hurricanes made their blockbuster addition late last week, adding the former Georgia Bulldogs starting quarterback who's got a 24-3 record in 2 seasons as a starter. He is now a Miami Hurricane, and we have the privilege of being joined by, it's been way too long since we've had the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, with us. So, Brian, at Miami, of course, losing Cam Ward to the NFL, an uncertain quarterback outlook until a few days ago. We were all wondering, hey, next year, does the team maybe take a big step back to try and build up their next quarterback, possibly an Emory Williams? What happens? So Miami goes out there and makes the biggest splash available. I mean, Carson Beck, now the number 1 rated transfer in the portal. They bring him down to South Florida. How does that change the expectation in your mind for the Hurricanes next season?
Well, I mean, nobody outside of like me and a handful of people that have seen Emory play very much at like the high school level know much about him because he's barely played for Miami. So, I mean, a guy that's been on a national title team, yeah, it's going to go up. Obviously, the question, how much does he assimilate to the offense and how healthy is he through spring and all that? That second part is the big one for me because it's not just the physical, Alex, it's the mental. That was an awkward injury. When I watched that again, I was like, oh, wow. He's closest thing for a college football quarterback is being a pitcher. And a lot of pitchers, even after they're healthy, they don't want to throw the curveball and some of those things. He's got to be able to take hits. How does he do that? But if he can, because it's been proven, this is a team that can win 10 games next year or more if he's totally dialed in with the offense.
Yeah, I mean, should that be the expectation would be to try to accomplish what Miami fell short of this year, and that would be, getting to the ACC championship game and potentially getting to the CFP. Now, I know that the rebuttal would be, well, hey, look, Cam Ward was incredible and Miami couldn't get to the ACC championship with him. I think there's no question other parts of the team need to improve. It's why Miami just hired a new defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, and why they're adding defensive players. But I mean, I would say, Brian, Miami's intent is there to try and accomplish this coming season, getting to that ACC title game, getting to the CFP, those goals that they fell short of in 2024.
Why not? Miami's roster is now to a point, especially in the trenches, where they can compete with anybody. Of course, the point you're getting towards there on that other part is the secondary's got to get immensely better. There's no nice way to say it, but Carson Beck doesn't play corner. He doesn't play nickel. He doesn't play safety. So if they go score 35 points a game and they don't make it, don't point at Carson Beck. He can only do so much for his job. And I think at times it probably impacted Ward. He'll probably never say anything about it, but some of the throws or decisions that he made, he's like, we got to score because I know we ain't stopping nobody. Especially at the back half of the season, like that game against, you're up 21-0, and that defense couldn't do anything. I mean, it's terrible. At some point, the defense has got to win you games. Carson Beck, obviously playing at Georgia, had some of those luxuries, but Miami's front seven's pretty good now. They got to find a way in that secondary because I think he could throw for 3,000 yards. Why not? He's done it before. Miami has plenty of running game to help him with play action, and he's very good at it. I think Miami got a good pickup.
Let's pick up more on that, on Carson Beck as a quarterback, Brian. Could you give me, and you mentioned a couple things there, what he does well, expand on that, and also, any limitations. He did have 12 interceptions this past season. So let's talk about Carson Beck, the quarterback.
The biggest thing with him is when he presses, he really presses. For anybody that's interested to see him go in the tank, it's weird because Georgia's defense dominated in this game. But when they played the game at Texas, he had 3 picks and they still won. That's the terrible recipe, but their defense had 7 sacks. You can't count on that. I mean, Georgia's front seven is ridiculous, but he played very poorly against some zone coverage, some post-snap reads where things changed. Georgia's defense is complex. So against teams that just play man or basic cover 2, I think he'll carve them up. It's just like anything else. Can he take this step up when he goes against teams that are switching the coverage after the snap or show some looks that he hasn't seen before? It seemed to bother him in that Texas game. And their defensive coordinator is fantastic. They took Jeremiah out of the game against Ohio State. He had 1 catch for 3 yards. That defense for Texas is legit. But at the same time, if you're going to compete, you got to go through the schedule. They're going to play Florida again, et cetera. They're going to play some good teams. They have to be able to rely on him not to turn it over. The good news is, I don't know how this is possible. Georgia's run game this past year was garbage. That should never be the case at Georgia. Miami's run game, especially with a balanced offensive line, good running backs, I don't have any fear that Mirabal will figure out the O-line for the next season. He should be doing what he does best the most, and that's play action and throwing in situations where he's not behind the chains. It should be 2nd and 5 a lot for the U, and Beck is an accurate quarterback.
Yeah, so, you talked about times that Beck didn't play great as a Georgia Bulldog. Usually the defense was there to pick him up, and Miami is trying. You talked about Miami's defensive secondary. The Hurricanes are trying to revamp that defense. They've already added 4 defensive backs in the transfer portal. They've added a new defensive coordinator, and I'm going to read you guys something that Kane Sport posted on social media that I think is going to make us like Corey Heatherman even more. And hopefully, of course, this all translates to success on the field. But Miami's new defensive coordinator, according to Kane Sport, and I agree with this based on what we've surmised, he keeps schemes simple, which should help a Miami group that too often was running around confused in 2024. Heatherman's agenda for opposing offenses is also simple. Quote, we want to give them no hope right from the very start of the game. Okay, fair enough. But I'd like to ask you, Brian, last season, which, didn't go well defensively under Lance Guidry. I mean, how much of that for you was on the scheming and the coaching? Because it's always some of both, right? But how much of it was on the coaching versus the personnel?
I found it last year to be one of the most confusing things ever. And you and I had talked about this on and off air. Like the truth teller and I talked about this on and off air. We didn't understand why the secondary regressed so much because they brought in the DB coach from Marshall that he'd worked with when they were great. They were good the year before, and they got worse with even a better staff. I thought it was more personnel, which I know fans don't ever like to hear because it's a lot harder to pick the personnel part and make it better.
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, there were just situations where there was nobody within 10 yards of players. Like it just bust after bust. That Syracuse game, I mean, for the love of mankind. So I don't know, man. Like my question for you is for Miami's defense to be what it should be, do they have a guy on the roster at corner that can man up and take away another team's best player now, Dabari has been banged up. I don't know what his circumstance is.
Damari,
and I'm sure that's a big question going into spring ball for the Canes. It should be. But did they get anybody else that they think can be a number one corner? I mean, flat out an NFL player. If the answer is no, then they're not going anywhere. That is the number one thing they've got to do because you look at the teams that made the Final Four, they all have multiple NFL corners.
Yeah.
It's the difference. And there's only so many of those guys. So we'll see in spring ball, but they certainly put their money where their mouth is in the portal. They're trying to bring in good players. So I ask you, which one of those guys do you have the best feel for?
I like Ethan O'Connor, who they added in the portal. They also added Charles Brantley, who's got a lot of experience. Emmanuel Carnley from Arizona, who didn't have the best grades last year, but was a freshman very long. And, to really the first name that popped in my head when you asked that question, knowing like he still needs development, but I'm hoping OJ Frederick can be that guy. Like he showed signs of it as a true freshman, Brian. Now, he didn't have a very good game against Syracuse. I thought they did kind of a good job exposing him a little bit. But again, true freshman, he played well throughout the year. I'm hoping OJ Frederick can continue to be that guy and become that guy more consistently, that he gets a little bit older and more mature.
Well, I think from what it sounds like, they're going to be a little more aggressive, a little more man, maybe not as much complex. But Frederick is a guy that has so much physical skill. I don't doubt that. The other guy that I'm curious about is Patterson. I think him being in the back end of the defense year two, freshman safeties, it's a struggle. And Zaquan's one of my favorite recruits of the last several years. I think he will take a major step forward for Miami. And that also means helping guys. If you're a really good safety, you're helping guys get lined up when teams run bunch formations, when they use a lot of shifts. That stuff is not fun, but you got to learn that. It's more off the field work with film and chalkboard and guys talking, because what teams are trying to do is get busted plays. Somebody with motion and stuff, and then somebody scot-free. And Miami seemed to give up too many of those this past year. So they got to fix that. But we'll see. I mean, it can't be worse. There's no way you're going to tell me Miami secondary is going to be worse in 2025. No way.